is the core fear behind every blind spot to become like our parents or repeat their pattern? How far does the apple fall from a tree? Perhaps we secretly worry that we will pass these family patterns onto our offspring. So if the number one cause of conflict or conflicted beliefs is due to experiencing resistance, then how can we resolve the resistance from our fear that becomes showcased in our day-to-day lives? Regretfully, one of the biggest steps most of us miss is repatterning, which causes us to keep circling around the problem, therefore repeating the problem. We are born with many emotional and psychological triggers as if they are pre-installed, or in other words, inherited in our DNA. Sorry, friends, no fair. But this is why we grow up to find ourselves with similar epigenetic tendencies as our parents or grandparents, whether it is positive or negative. These inherent tendencies are often revealed within primary relationships and even to the extent of repeating the same mistakes or behavior and dysfunctional family patterns, including codependency behaviors. The majority of codependent patterns are poor inherent coping mechanisms, i.e., to alcoholism, addiction, or relationship entanglements that lead to abuse, anxiety, worry, depression, dissociation, denial, or other cognitive distortions and mental or emotional health imbalances that we are also prone to because they have been perpetuated from past generations. Why is denial or dissociation so common? We don't realize that when we are confronting or facing pain, we have a difficult time and begin to experience dissonance because our mind can't seem to make sense with what doesn't feel right. So therefore, the mind, as a protection mechanism, tends to slip into a coping mechanism for our survival, which is leading us to dissociating or even sometimes denying. However, science can substantiate that epigenetics can have a strong pull on us with a perceived power over us because it's at the DNA level, which means it's encoded in our subconscious and psychological programming passed from ancestral behaviors. Meanwhile, we may consciously want something else. The purpose alone is why we develop conflicted beliefs. Traumas are passed from one family line down to the next through RNA strands and will recycle. And if these ancestral links are not dealt with correctly or even directly, they can affect us and our offspring for the rest of our lives until we become proactive and do something about it because they will not go away on their own. Moreover, if there was a perceived void or unmet need in your parents, whether it was marital, money, emotional, and so forth, then no doubt this same perceived lack was transferred to you, whether genetically or through parental modeling and conditioning. It's always going to be absorbed in one way or another. So our parents and their parents' internal experiences are often shaping many of our beliefs. So to provide an example, we may repeat similar stresses or behaviors. Again, whether it's financial, marital, academic, physical, mental, and so on. To illustrate, in reference to the diathesis model, the nature versus nurture argues that both these factors may be equally responsible for our makeup and development. Yet nurture encompasses social and environmental conditioning, which was primarily shaped by our parents if we were raised in the traditional family structure. So for instance, growing up in poverty may cause repetitive cycles of poverty and scarcity, and we will see those patterns evidenced throughout our life. Consequently, our genetic propensities are both inherited and modeled in youth, increasing the epigenetic propensities. Our inherited modes of thinking will reinforce our beliefs. The repetitive thoughts are the consequences of the rigid beliefs that we have inherited that we often want to replace, which is where we often resist repeating our parents' behaviors because these are the inherent beliefs or thought patterns. So if a parent may have thought money doesn't grow on trees, then we may find that we are repeating the same beliefs that is also perhaps creating the same external conditions. Therefore, it takes diligence to change the narrative and repattern the code by frequently repeating new thought patterns. So if we are to reinforce new beliefs and improve our psychological programming, we can use different techniques, i.e. asking what we would do differently to produce an ideal outcome and staying solution focused instead of operating from the negativity bias and staying stuck in the problem or in the state of resistance, which is more common. So perhaps adopting a new belief using positive affirmations or even autosuggestion. For example, I am wealthy and prosperous versus impoverished, or I am healing and overcoming instead of I am sick or worry about lifelong illnesses. We must put powerful thoughts and feelings into these new beliefs and engage the neural pathways with the feeling sensation to effectively repattern the encoded programming, therefore overriding the old programming. So is perhaps our deepest fear also our biggest blind spot that is sabotaging our best efforts? For example, do you often witness others who may have what you have potentially worked harder for? Give it some thought, because traumas are common to everyone, although to varying degrees of severity. Inherent beliefs and adverse childhood experiences, as well as other unresolved emotions, will present themselves in our life as fears, negative thoughts, anxieties, limiting beliefs, which are also hidden beneath our fears, turning into our greatest saboteurs and unwanted behaviors. Subsequently, our beliefs and inherent programming are either working for us or against us. So let's take a look at some perceptual reframing techniques in order to start working on the next step to repattern the programming. It is imperative to our individual advancement to be introspective about our fears, because often our greatest fear is to become like our parents in the same way. So we can mitigate the propensity to repeat their patterns with key questions and using specific perceptual reframing questions, such as, instead of resisting the fear, ask what meaning you have assigned to becoming like your parents. For instance, is it a failure or controlling? And what meaning have you assigned to the fear, such as, I will not be loved, or I will not feel loved and approved by others? Then neutralize the fear and resentment by reframing what you resist about it and what you can gain from the fear. What are you meant to learn? Maybe love and acceptance, perhaps. But look at how you would like to change and move to the solution, the outcome, the ideal outcome, and begin to anchor from that particular mental picturing. And how can you gain compassion for a parent and perceive him or her as drowning, metaphorically speaking? And what would you want for this parent that you also want for yourself? To thrive, to be more successful, to receive the support? That step is generally one of the most important steps. Generally, we stay stuck in the problem and we don't move forward to what this meant to us. And then generally when there's the fear, it's because at the very root of it is feelings of shame, because we've assigned I'm not loved or good enough, and therefore shame is running the show. So how would you want to be the change you wish to see in Course Correct? A popular quote by Gandhi.
Our powerhouse. So if beliefs are formed by the internal thoughts and emotions through our perceptual reality, then how do you suppose we form new beliefs? Consciously, you may want to eliminate all these negative beliefs and personal limitations, but the conscious mind is at the mercy of the hardwired beliefs programmed within the subconscious mind, which makes up the majority of our life experiences and behaviors. The autopilot subconscious gives directions, and the conscious follows orders until we retrain it consciously. Our beliefs subconsciously control our behavior and can either empower or disempower us through our thoughts, choices, and actions. Therefore, subconscious beliefs unconsciously dictate our reality and run our psychological programming. Beliefs are formed when we have a thought accompanied by a feeling that becomes rooted in the subconscious mind, which creates a subjective perceptual reality for each of us. So what might this encourage us to do? Reprogram negative subconscious beliefs and create conscious thinking to recode our beliefs, perhaps? Your conscious mind is the active part of you that is awake, is alert, assesses, calculates, and judges. Our subconscious mind, on the other hand, is where memories, emotions, and beliefs are stored, which accounts for more than 90% of our greatest mind power. Emotion may be the greatest powerhouse of the mind. When we combine both thought and feeling, we utilize our heart-mind synchronicity, overcoming struggle, conflicted beliefs, resistance, and step into the magical flow state. So, wouldn't we want to make the most of this powerful elixir by stripping ourselves of negative beliefs and restructuring our mind with beliefs that work for us rather than against us? Unpacking our subconscious mind is where the majority of our innate DNA potential resides, our etheric codes. Face your fears and access dormant mind potential. So we ask, are you prolonging your inner work? Doing our inner work doesn't have to be so scary. Although most of us escape our fears and anxieties with unhealthy coping behaviors to feel better, then end up developing poor coping identities to anesthetize the pain, secretly worrying that we will pass these behaviors on to our offspring or never face the skeletons in our closet. The coping behaviors are fleeting and the fears come back to rear their face again and again until we disrupt the pattern and heal the root trauma. So those are just symptoms of the actual problem until we face the root of this trauma. Another painful cycle will continue. Generational demons are found in every family, and as it turns out, for decades, it was the primary cause hidden beneath every chief problem that our clients had. This is the very reason we designed a panacea system, to overcome the fear of recoding our encoded psychology, because it can appear scary at first, and we'll only continue to procrastinate doing our inner healing work instead of heal the programming and all the problems that come with it once and for all. So, the Panacea program offers step-by-step intuitive guidance, meditation, and therapeutic exercises to upgrade psychology and improve neurochemistry by mitigating the hard work involved in what is often associated with psychotherapy. Therefore, we do not need to prolong doing our inner healing work because we will feel so much better about ourselves once we engage in this healing process and model healthy behaviors toward ourselves and our loved ones, lending them a better fighting chance for their future. Recoding new beliefs. We all have negative default patterns that we want to eradicate or improve in some way. For instance, many of us may want to learn from our parents' mistakes in hopes to never repeat them, perhaps even overcorrecting a little. We may even think we have that already handled by rebelling against their natures, and we end up swinging the pendulum in the opposite direction. Yet when we attempt to run away from our past, including our heritage, it will always come back to bite us, because essentially our attempt is to run away from ourselves, which we know is impossible. When we resist becoming like our parents, we actually meet more opposition and invite more resistance into our lives, which perpetuates the sabotage cycle. Moreover, it's an ineffective coping strategy, just like Newton's cradle, repeating the effect when the swinging sphere strikes. Fortunately, genetic recoding is still part of the solution, which would mean that it's not necessary to repeat your parents' mistakes in order to learn your own lessons. Making peace and accepting who they are, in fact, promises peace. And we are no longer bound to repeat their mistakes or continue to oppose them. The Panacea system ensures that we are covering every step to fully recode the programming and not making the mistake to miss any steps, and therefore repeating the painful lessons or hoping it will naturally resolve on its own, which it doesn't. Just as software won't rewrite itself, the internal and inherent programming needs to be rewritten or reprogrammed if we wish for a better outcome. So by virtue of the resistance persistence law, what we consciously or unconsciously resist is more likely to occur, and what we choose to accept, we don't give power and attention to. Because as we choose to accept something, we can therefore neutralize the emotional charge or triggers and love what we can accept. Moreover, love heals all things. Then we will be liberated from this pendulum tendency and recode the behavior successfully, as well as no longer pass down the generational patterns to future generations, liberating the entire family from the same burdens.